Hi, Big Mike, Barbecue Mike. How you doing? I'm guessing you are on YouTube and there's Gary back. I'm sorry, Gary, I had to switch off a minute ago because I'm had to switch off and then switch on again. You know the routine. But I'm back. I'm here, and I'm thinking Thanksgiving. I'm thinking that we should be talking turkey. Um, uh, I don't know how many of you may have seen my famous turkey technique, but let me give you the summary, and then if you want it in detail, you can go to amazingribs.com and look up turkey. But it's a really cool technique. Now, I'm guessing by now many of you have heard of spatchcocking. And spatchcocking is a technique to improve the way turkey cooks. If you cook turkey whole, you can brown the outside, but you can't brown the inside. And the inside, the cavity, becomes a pocket of cooler air than the outside. Now, if you stuff it, you're going to make it into a big thermal bowling ball. And you have to cook the center to the safe temperature of 160 or so. And by the time you get the stuffing cooked to the safe temperature, the breast meat and the thighs and all the outer layers are way overcooked. So you don't want to stuff the bird ever under any circumstances. I've got a really cool idea for how to handle the stuffing, and it's called making stuffing muffins, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But if you leave the center empty, it will cook faster and more evenly, but better still is to take the turkey and cut out the backbone. Get really good heavy kitchen shears or good clean shears from your workshop downstairs, tin snips or something, and remove that backbone. It's a little tricky because the bones, the ribs that are attached to that backbone can be a little tough. But you remove the backbone and you save it, throw it into a bag in the freezer, and you'll use it for making turkey stock either later today. Well, actually, don't freeze it. Just set it aside because we're going to use it today. Take that backbone out, and then you lay the bird out flat. And now you can brown both sides, and we all know brown is flavor. And it'll cook faster because the warm air circulates all around the bird, and you'll lose less moisture in cooking it faster. I like to cook at 325, which is a little higher than normal. I normally cook most everything at 225. But at 325, you need a little extra heat to render the fat that's under the skin. And you'll get your bird done faster and more evenly. Now, it's not as cool looking as that Norman Rockwell whole bird, but it isn't far off. I mean, it's still a whole bird. It's just kind of flattened out or butterflied. They call it spatchcocking. And if you have to, when it's time to serve, or you can still bring it in and kind of tuck it back together into a Norman Rockwell look and show it around the table and then take it into the kitchen and carve it. The secret to my technique, though, is that I get a pan, an aluminum pan or an enamel pan or a stainless steel pan, but a pretty good size one, and put it between the cooking rack underneath the bird and above the coals or above the flame on a gas grill or on a pellet smoker. Now, if you can't get the pan in there, you can just set the pan on top of the cooking grate and put another grate on top of the pan and set the bird on top. But what we want is we want the bird hovering above the pan. And by the way, if you're cooking it indoors, don't set it into a metal pan. You got this great Calphalon stainless steel roasting pan with a V-shaped rack. When the bird is down in that pan, the bottom half is not going to cook as evenly as the top half because the top half is bathed by warm air. The bottom half, the sides of the pan are blocking warm air, and also you've got liquid in the pan, and that liquid can't go above 212. So now you've got like a cool radiator beneath the bird. So you always want the bird above the pan. So on the grill, you're going to put it on the grate above the pan. And in that pan, you're going to put that backbone. You're going to snip off the wingtips, put them in there. You're going to cut off all of the flab and the extra skin around both cavities, front and rear. You're going to put an apple. You're going to chop it up. You're going to put some celery, including the leaves, a couple of carrots maybe, maybe some wine. You're going to put together a bath under the bird that will turn into a turkey stock. And it's going to collect the drippings, which will have a little smoky flavor. And in fact, the pan itself, the liquid in the pan, will collect smoky flavor. And if it takes a couple hours to cook the bird, and that's probably what it'll take, depending on the size of the bird, it's going to get marvelous flavor and extract all the flavor from the carrots and the celery. And you can throw a handful of herbs in there. I have all of this on AmazingRibs.com, including some recommended quantities of these things, but I'm just trying to give you the concepts. When the bird is almost done, you're going to use your thermometer and check the temp. You're shooting for 160 in the thickest part. And when it gets to, say, 155, 150, pull that pan out, strain out all the solids, throw them away. They've given up their all for you. And taste that liquid, and it should be spectacular. If it's a little thin, if it feels like it's not quite rich enough, then just pour it in a pot and put it on a stovetop and reduce it, cook it. Turn the heat up and let some of that water evaporate so it gets more intense. And that is the best darn gravy ever. When you drizzle it over that breast meat, it'll soak into the meat. If you mix it with flour, as a lot of people do to make the gravy, you're going to make the gravy really heavy and thick, and it won't penetrate the meat. It'll just sit on top of the meat. Starch from your flour is really a large molecule, and it just cannot penetrate meat. So this technique is really good. Everybody who's ever tried this recipe writes back and tells me it's fantastic. So go look at AmazingRibs.com and check that out. Now, I mentioned the stuffing. What I do with the stuffing is I take a regular stuffing recipe, and again, I've got this recipe on AmazingRibs.com, and add an egg or two. And that helps pull it together. And I cook them in muffin pans. And when you cook them in muffin pans, the top gets really good and crispy. And you pop them out, and everybody gets their own stuffing muffin. And everybody gets a really crispy edge, which is the best part, and that's what everybody wants. So stuffing muffins are really great. And if you want, you can take some of this stock and drizzle it over those stuffing muffins to give it the more turkey flavor that you think it might have gotten had it been inside the bird. It doesn't, by the way. So, in any case, those are my hot tips. There's also recipes on the website. I have a drunken cranberry recipe, which is fun. It's cranberry raisins simmered in port wine. There's sweet potato wedges that are grilled. So go check out my Thanksgiving recipes. Just go to AmazingRibs.com and type in Thanksgiving, and I think you'll find most of them there. And have a good Thanksgiving. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and the election will be over by then. So don't let the results turn into a fist fight and a brawl, and everybody enjoy everybody's company. So, Gary's got a question. Okay, I'm near Chicago. Yes. What do I do for winter outdoor cooking? Actually, I have a whole article, not surprisingly, on AmazingRibs.com on cold weather cooking. There's a couple of things that you might be concerned about. Number one, obviously cold air. Remember, when you're cooking, whether it's charcoal or gas or pellets, oxygen is required. Oxygen helps with combustion, and there's combustion going on. So the air that is being sucked into your cooker is a lot colder in the winter than it is in the summer. So it's going to take more oxygen and more fuel than it does in warm weather. So whatever your normal ratio of oxygen to fuel is, you need to up it. So if you're, say, cooking on a gas grill and you typically use 2 burners on medium, crank them up to full. On charcoal, add more charcoal. Or open the vents more. You need to play with it. And what you might do is do a dry run. People doesn't dawn on that, but you can do a dry run. You don't have to have food in there, but you need a thermometer in there. So set up your cooker, get it up to temp with your thermometer, and figure out how much fuel and how much oxygen you need to get it right and hit your target temp. Now on AmazingRibs.com, I've got this article on cold weather cooking. The other enemy is wind. And wind will strike the metal surface of the cooker. Normally, the metal surfaces get very hot. You've got flame inside those cookers, but wind or rain and snow are going to cool that hot metal. So you want to protect against the wind if you can. So find a place to put your cooker in a corner or behind a wall. Now, don't get too close to the house, especially plastic or vinyl siding, because it can melt vinyl siding. But what I've seen some people do is just get 4x8 sheets of plywood, put some hinges on them, 3 of them or 4 of them, and just build a box like a phone booth and put it in that phone booth. Other techniques that I've seen people do, depending on your type of cooker, is use hot water heater insulator. My lab. Hot water insulators. There's all kinds of things that you can consider wrapping in. Some companies actually sell wraps for this sort of thing. So for cold weather cooking, go to that AmazingRibs.com and check the article on cold weather cooking. Mike Scott, can turkey breast be cooked to 150 for 10 minutes to be considered pasteurized and safe to eat? Okay. Mike is on to something. The U.S. government, Food and Drug Administration, wants to keep us alive. And so they have told us, cook to 165. At 165, all bacteria die, theoretically, within 7 seconds or so. But you can cook to 160 and within, say, 30 seconds or so. I forget the exact numbers. There's a chart on AmazingRibs.com, and I think it may even be in my book, a chart that tells you at what temperature, how long you got to cook it. And I'm guessing Mike has looked at that chart, which is where he's coming up with this 10 minutes, because it's not just temperature, it's time and temperature. And sous vide people know this. Sous vide people know that, okay, if I'm going to do turkey or chicken, I can do it at 150. And how long does it have to be holding at that temperature to be safe? One of the interesting aspects is when it hits 150 and you take it out, it's going to stay at 150 for several minutes. And in fact, it may even go up to 155 or 160. So yes, it's probably fine. Just go check that chart and see. But a warning to you. I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to make sure that your turkey is more moist and juicy. The funny thing is with chicken and turkey, when they're cooked down in that 150 range, they feel kind of funny. The texture, almost a little slippery and slimy. Now, that's not the case with pork. You can cook pork at 135, and I recommend you do. But chicken somehow or other feels funny at that temperature. Yeah, okay, Matt just logged in, just piped up and says, yeah, turkey texture at 150 isn't good. Yeah, that's a personal thing, but I agree with you. I shoot for 160. USDA says 165, but I shoot for 160 because you're going to have carryover cooking. It's going to go up in temp. And anything over 165, you're bordering on cardboard. So maybe try 155, Mike. That may be better. And how about this? Before Thanksgiving, go out and buy yourself a turkey or a turkey breast and make one and cook it to 150 or 155, whichever you want. and see what you think of it. How do you like it? And if you don't like it, or your family, your spouse, kids, whatever, don't like it, then don't do it on Thanksgiving. And Leonardo is here from Brazil. Good to meet you, Leonardo. Thank you. Oh, what do I do to remove the fat from this sauce? Yeah, I just talked about this sauce or gravy that I make underneath, and you filter it, you run it through a strainer, throw out all the solids. There's a couple of gizmos that you can buy. There's one, I think, by Oxo Good Grips. I bought mine on Amazon. It holds something like 16 ounces, but it's got a handle. When you squeeze the handle, it opens a valve at the bottom, and the clear liquid, it's not clear, the fat-free gravy runs through into a bowl or a pan or whatever, and the fat stays behind, and it's really cool. They're not that expensive, and they really work. There's others that are like measuring cups, and they have a spout that's attached to the bottom. So when you tip to pour, the spout is drawing the liquid off the bottom. Another technique I've had luck with is you can drop a couple of ice cubes in there, and that will help the fat congeal. It floats to the surface fairly quickly. You can just scoop it off with a ladle, but it's not as good as using these fat separators. So go to Amazon and search for fat separator. I think that will get you what I'm talking about. They work very well, and that's what I use. Okay. Let's see what else is. By the way, if any of you are members of the AmazingRibs.com Pitmaster Club, we're going to have a little meetup at Weber Grill headquarters coming up next month, where we have several of our members, small group, come in and tour Weber and see their new grills. And then we're going to cook a turkey just like I described. I'm going to do it. And we're going to divide up into groups and cook some of the sides, do some stuffing muffins, do some drunken cranberries, do some sweet potatoes. So that should be fun. If you're a member, go there, go to the Pitmaster Club, and there should be a link easy to find on how to sign up. Okay. So, I'm guessing a bunch of folks are probably watching the baseball game. What else? Hit me with your questions. Anything. Gotta have some questions. All right, well, I don't see any questions coming in, so what else should we talk about? I've had some fun with turkey. Matt says he loves the stuffing muffin recipe. Thank you, Matt. Some spouses, some of you may prefer your turkeys and chickens without the skin. The skin has got a lot of fat in it. A lot of people don't want that extra fat, although I think it tastes really good. But if you're being told to remove the skin, don't throw it away. You can spread it out on a grill, and now you have to stand there and watch it with the lid up, the temperature low. But spread it out on the grill and cook it until it crisps. And you can make cracklings out of it, turkey cracklings or chicken cracklings. They get hard like potato chips. And you can take them inside and crumble them on a salad, in a soup, on your turkey. Got some turkey breast sliced up, crumble some of the turkey cracklings right on there. That's a fun thing to do. What else? I have been known lately to break the bird down into parts. I'm always trying to cook things to optimum doneness. Now, the thickest meat on the bird is the breast meat. And so if you're cooking that to 160 or so, the temperature in the thigh or the drumstick or the wing are going to be different. And so if you break the bird down, if you cut the wings off, if you cut the breast off, the rib cage, if you remove the legs, the thigh and the drumstick, and separate those two, you're going to have, let's see, 2 wings, 2 drumsticks, 2 thighs, 2 breasts. So you got 8 pieces. You got 8 pieces. But you can temp each one individually and control it. So you can get those wings done at optimum temp and get the breast. In fact, if you want, you can take the breast off and pound it flat so it cooks more evenly, because the breast meat, if you think of it, is kind of pear-shaped. It's got a thin end, and that almost always overcooks. So if you pound it a little bit, you'll get it to cook more evenly. So that's what I do. And then all that carcass, the thighs, the ribs, and all the bones that I've cut the meat off of, I smash that up and put it in the gravy pan. So while the turkey is sitting and cooking and dripping into the gravy pan, those bones are now in the gravy pan, and the flavor is being extracted from the meat that's stuck to the bones, and also the marrow and so on. So that's what I've been doing lately. So I don't have a whole bird to present for oohs and ahs, but I do carve it in a pretty fashion, and I serve it on a platter so that the breast meat is carved into nice even slices. Every slice has a little sliver of skin on it. I carve up the dark meat, and I put the wings up at the top. There's pictures of my platters on them. So it's a pretty platter. It's not a whole bird, but the platter looks very pretty. And then I drizzle some of this gravy over the top, and it's always a hit. Big hit. Everybody loves it. Okay. Leonardo's asking, is it possible to cook spatchcock turkey on an open flame grill, not a smoker? Yes. The trick there, and I don't know what kind of grill you have, Leonardo, is to set the grill up in 2 zones. And this is crucial to almost all outdoor cooking, is you have a hot zone on one side and a not hot zone on the other side. So if it's charcoal, you push all the coals over to one side. If it's gas, you turn on 1 or 2 burners only on one side and leave 1 or 2 burners on the other side off. And now you have temperature control. Cooking is all about temperature control. So you want to cook most everything, including the turkey, in the not hot side. You don't want it directly over the flame. That flame is producing infrared radiation, which is really intense, concentrated radiation, and it will cook the exterior really fast and leave the interior undercooked. So you put it over on the indirect or the not hot side, and that's kind of like standing in the shade on a sunny day. It's still warm over there because the air is circulating, and it's convection airflow that keeps it warm. It'll take longer than if you cook over the flame, but it'll cook more evenly. In fact, you don't even have to flip the meat when it's in the not hot side. So I have a Weber kettle, and I've done it with a whole turkey. Got the coals pushed all the way over to the side. I use a gadget called the Slow and Sear. Again, there's references to this on AmazingRibs.com. It's a really cool gadget. It actually corrals all the charcoal into a very tight space on one side. And on the other side, I put the turkey, spatchcock it, lay it out. You can see pictures on AmazingRibs.com. So I lay it out, spatchcocked on the indirect side, and they cook fine, and it never burns. Never. It just cooks great. But you don't want to expose it to direct flame or heat if you can avoid it. That will burn it and overcook it. Smoked desserts. on a Weber Smoky Mountain. You can bake pies on a Weber Smoky Mountain. Now, Weber Smoky Mountain is almost entirely indirect cooking. So the way it's designed and set up, the food is never exposed to direct flame. So, yes, you have essentially an oven that you can bake in. And I've never done it, but I've seen people do cookies in it. I have done pie in it. If you go to AmazingRibs.com and search on desserts, you'll see some good ideas there that might work. Yes. Oh, really good question, Barbecue Mike. Frozen turkeys sometimes say on the label that they are 8 to 12% retained water. Well, it's not retained, it's added water. Does this mean it's pre-brined? It's a solution that they inject because they know that turkey dries out so easily. And if you follow the government regulations and you cook it to 165, or God forbid, you rely on the pop-up thermometer, which doesn't pop till 170 or beyond, you're going to have cardboard. It's going to be terribly dry. It's going to be awful. So they inject water with some salt and some other compounds that are designed to help retain moisture. If you see that, and you probably don't need to do brining. And by the way, speaking of brining, you don't need to take a beer cooler and fill it with salt water and apple cider and black pepper and garlic and salt and soak it overnight and keep throwing bags of ice in there. That's crazy. There's a technique called dry brining, which once again I've written about extensively. Dry brining, and in fact, I coined the term dry brining as opposed to wet brining, which is the technique of submerging it in liquid. Dry brining is simply sprinkling salt on the surface. What happens is really quite remarkable. The moisture comes out of the meat and melts the salt and breaks it into sodium and chloride, two little atoms, and they split up. It's called ionizing. And they move towards the center of the meat. And when they reach the center of the meat, they affect the proteins. They alter it. And it's called denaturing the proteins. And the proteins then can hold on to moisture better. So brining, wet brining or dry brining, has this wonderful effect. Just dry brining is sprinkle the salt on the meat and just stick it in the fridge overnight. And that salt will penetrate and it will do its magic. And if you have a bird that's been injected, and most of them are now, you can still do a light dry brine. Don't go too heavy. And you'll see how it works out. If you feel like it needs more salt, of course, you can always add it at the table. Leonardo's asking, is it possible to do a spatchcock turkey on a Santa Maria grill? That's tricky because the Santa Maria grills, they're big flat grills, and you're burning usually logs or charcoal down below, and you crank up and down the grate that the food sits on. And so you can lower it down just above the charcoal or the logs in order to get more heat and raise it up to reduce the heat. And that's a really cool technique. The problem is most of them don't have a lid, but you can outsmart that. You can rig up a lid. You can get a big disposable aluminum pan, or if you have a big roasting pan in the fridge in your house, you can use your Santa Maria grill, put all the stuff the hot stuff off to one side, put the turkey on the indirect zone close to the heat, and put a pan over it. The pan is going to capture hot air as it comes up from below and circulate it around the meat. It works fantastic. I've done it. I had a Santa Maria. I don't have one now, but I had one. And I've done that, and it works okay. Not as good as having a lid. And you might look at it if you're handy or you know somebody who's good at welding and see if you can get them to fashion a lid for you. But it works. It works just fine. Now, there was something else I wanted to talk about with that turkey. Most chicken and turkey recipes tell you to truss the two legs. So, and in fact, if you buy a frozen turkey, the legs have this plastic truss that holds the legs together. Now, that means the crotch of the turkey, just like your crotch, if you hold your legs together, there's no hot air getting in there. So it's cooking on the outside, but not on the inside. So when you cut the legs away, they're beautiful golden and crispy on one side, but they're flabby and tan on the other side. And the legs, which are dark meat, are best when cooked to 170 or 175. The breasts best at 160. So let your freak flag fly. Cut that plastic thing, get rid of it, and let those legs flop out so that hot air can circulate around them and brown the skin on all sides and apply more heat to the thighs and the drumstick so you can get them up to ideal temperature of, say, 170. Another cool technique that some people do is you can lift the skin. You start at the back end where the cavity opens. You can lift that skin and work your fingers in there. Try not to rip the skin, but create airspace between the skin and the meat. And then you can put your seasoning in there. Now, you can put seasoning on top of the skin, and that's fine. That's wonderful. Makes skin taste great. But if you want, you can put some of the seasoning. You can put herbs. I have a recipe on my site called Simon and Garfunkel rub, and it's got parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. I promise not to sing anymore. And so if you use that, you can get that flavor onto the meat under the skin. Okay? Yeah, Gary says he's using sous vide to reheat leftovers alive. Yeah, sous vide is a really great technique for reheating anything. And I highly recommend it. I use it for leftovers. But I also use the microwave a lot for leftovers. Sous vide's cool, and I've written a lot about sous vide. I even did an ebook on it. It's on Amazon for $3.99. Sous vide Q, it's called. And I have articles about it on AmazingRibs.com. And my new book, coming out in spring, has a whole chapter on sous vide Q, I call it, barbecue and grilling. So yeah, sous vide's a really good technique. A couple of tips on that. A lot of stuff has been written about sous vide, and there's a lot of, I think, erroneous information. A lot of recipes call for you to pour oil into the bag when you're sous videing. Meat is 75% water. Oil and water don't mix. That oil does not penetrate. It does you little or no good, and I've done side-by-side tastings. A lot of recipes tell you to smoke the meat before it goes in the bag. Well, that helps, but it's not as good as if you smoke it after it comes out of the bag. Because while it's in the bag, if you've done this, you know there's a lot of liquid in that bag, and a lot of smoke particles wash off, so you lose a lot of the smoke flavor. Some of it remains, some of it penetrates and sticks on the meat. Herbs and spices. A lot of recipes call for you to season it. Get the salt on before it goes into sous vide. That's very important. As I was just explaining, salt will penetrate. But nothing else will. Pepper, garlic, those guys, they all have large molecules and they can't penetrate. So don't bother sprinkling them on the meat before you cook. I salt the meat first, put it in the sous vide bag, suck the oxygen out or the air out, sous vide, never below 131. There are bacteria that actually love to reproduce at 125, 130. So 131, it seems to be the temperature at which most bacteria start to die. Follow the instructions for how long to sous vide to make sure you kill the bacteria. And then pull it out And you can either chill it, refrigerate it, and hold it for later, or take it out of the bag and season it and throw it in the smoker. And you don't need more than 15 to 30 minutes for it to pick up a nice smoke flavor. And that's all you need to do. Okay. We got about 15 minutes left. Hit me with some more questions. I'm trying to think if there's something else important. This cranberry recipe is a lot of fun. I buy cranberry raisins. These are dehydrated cranberries. And throw them in a saucepan with some port wine. And that rehydrates them. It plumps them up. But it plumps them up with port wine. And it's sweet, not too boozy. It really tastes good. And you can throw in a little extra sugar and some seasonings if you like. Okay. Mike, you're full of good questions. Barbecue Mike again. When heating a ham on the barbecue, I just think I discovered a technique here that I didn't know about. No, it's not working. Oh, there it is. Okay, so if I click on his name, it appears on the screen. You slice it first or keep it whole. If you slice it, you expose surface area. And surface area is how moisture evaporates. So in general, all meats, you want to keep them whole so that they don't dehydrate or evaporate. Now, if you've got a pre-sliced ham, that's okay. Just make sure you don't fan it out. Or if you want in the kitchen, you can fan it out and get some seasonings and flavors down in the slices, but then compact them back up again. So now there are different kinds of hams, but most of what we get in this country is called city ham. And it's ham that's already been cured with nitrites, so it's pink, and it's already been smoked, and essentially it's already cooked, and it's called pre-cooked ham. All you have to do with that is reheat it to 145. That's your magic number. Now, what I like to do with it is I like to smoke it because it's pre-smoked. But if you smoke it again, that fresh smoke has a nice flavor. And it's on the surface, and so I almost always smoke it. And then I wrap it in foil, and before I seal off the foil packet, I put my glaze in there. And there's a recipe on the website. It's, I think, a apricot and mustard and a couple other goodies. So I wrap that all up, and then I pinch it off like a candy kiss, and just let that sit for a while. And some of the juices come off, and that becomes my gravy. And once again, there's a really good recipe for this on AmazingRibs.com. Jim Tortorelli, good to see you again. Jim, how you doing, buddy? Jim, I was just mentioning that we're doing a little gathering here in Chicago at the Weber Grill headquarters, and it's open just to members of the Pitmaster Club. If it hasn't filled up yet, you might want to take a look at it. I don't know. I know you're from, I think, somewhere in Indiana, and you've come in for our little friendly gatherings before, so you might want to take a look at this. It should be fun. We're going to do a turkey and a bunch of sides. Jim's saying, let's get here. There it is. I once overcooked a brisket and dried it out, thinking it was unusually long stall. Smoker was at 230. It's a good temp for brisket. Meat never got above 185. Okay, well, that's odd. The stall, many of you may have encountered, but let me, just in case somebody's not familiar with it, give you the background. You take a brisket or a pork butt, and you start smoking it around 230, 250, 225. I like 225. And it starts going up in internal temperature. You've got a thermometer stuck in it, and you're watching the temp go up, up, up. And then it hits somewhere around 150, 160, maybe 170, and it stops. And we want to cook it all the way up to 203. And I know that sounds crazy. That's well past well done. But at that temperature, all of the fat and the connective tissues break down, and you get very succulent, rich flavors. So when it hits that 150 to 170 range, it stalls and it doesn't go up. And it drives you nuts. And it can stick at that temperature for a couple hours. Meanwhile, your spouse is in the kitchen with the side dishes and the company's arriving, and where's the meal? And you're under the gun. What happens is it's what's called it's evaporative cooling. The moisture evaporating from the surface of the meat is cooling the meat at the same rate it's heating from the warm air inside the smoker or the grill. So they reach a stasis, a stall, and the temperature won't go up because it's cooling. It's just like you go out and cut the lawn, you start sweating, it keeps you cool. And eventually the surface will dry out, and that's bark. You get bark, which is essentially a lot like jerky. And you get this bark, which is dryish and crunchy because it's got your rub on it, and there's some sugar in the rub, and it's marvelous. But until the surface dries out, the temperature is stalled or stuck at whatever temp. In your case, it was 185. Likely the issue here is it just hadn't dried out. Now, maybe if you were spritzing, if you had a spray bottle with apple cider in it, which a lot of people do, or if you were basting, you were prolonging the stall, and you were preventing it from forming bark and drying out. So I don't know if you were doing that, but that may have been the cause. The other thing is you want to check your thermometer, make sure it's accurate. Now, the way a lot of people beat the stall is that when they see the stall coming up, or sometimes they'll just wait till it hits 150, 160, and the exterior looks nice and dark and brown. You wrap it in aluminum foil, and you wrap it tight, and you crimp it off tight so that air can't escape, so it can't cool. When you do that, you don't have evaporation, so you don't have evaporative cooling. And that's the trick called the Texas crutch. And it's very common, and all the competition chefs do it now. And it's great for retaining moisture and getting through the stall in a hurry. But what happens is you don't get as crunchy a crust. You don't get that heavy crust. Now, you can skirt it slightly by, when the food is just about done, taking it and throwing it on a gas grill over high heat and just drying out the surface and crisping it and forming your crust that way. And that's a good trick if you want good crunch. Ah, you're in Kentucky. That's right. I knew you were nearby. I still think you're related to my wife. Her name is Tortorello. He's Tortorelli. I built the Tortorello website, tortorello.com, years ago. I haven't updated it in maybe 10 years. But there's a whole bunch of families and relatives, and maybe some of you are there. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. Yeah, okay. So Jim says, hands off. He wasn't spritzing or anything. He uses multiple probes, so he's probably safe from thermometer failure. And he's now using the crutch but he's using butcher paper. A lot of chefs use foil. Some chefs use butcher paper. Butcher paper is very popular in Texas. It does allow a little moisture to escape. I've seen side-by-side tastings done with foil and paper. And I think it's a matter of personal preference. I use foil because I know it's pretty tight and it's easy. I always have it around. Okay. We got about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to go catch some of the ball game and try to figure out what the hell happened to Facebook tonight. Anybody else? Anything more? Questions? Anything. We don't have to talk about turkey or brisket, whatever's on your mind, whatever questions have been nagging you. If you haven't had a chance to visit AmazingRibs.com very much, I recommend you do. There's a lot of really great information there. I've been writing on it for years, and Clint Cantwell, my right-hand man, he's the president of the company now. He's got a lot of good content, and he's a champion competition cook. And then there's others on our team who've contributed, and it's just a really cool site. It's got most of your questions answered. Of course, it's, finding stuff on the internet is not that easy. But check it out. There's a search box. It's built by Google, so it's pretty good. And it finds things pretty well. Mike's asking, do I smoke my rib roast? Yes, and as I was just saying, I described the technique in detail on AmazingRibs.com. I'm designated prime rib cook for Christmas. And I usually buy USDA top choice, not prime. Prime is really expensive. And this is a very tender cut. Choice is fine. I get top choice. I've got a butcher who can get top choice. And I get a 7-bone roast, which is your standard full roast. And I remove the rib bones. And I set them aside, and that's a meal for my wife and me. I just smoke those rib bones. They're fantastic. There's a muscle, and if you've ever looked at a ribeye steak, you've noticed there's essentially 2 big muscles. There's the big center muscle that's called the eye of the ribeye. And then there's this crescent-shaped muscle that wraps around it. And there's a thick layer of fat between the two. Well, that muscle that wraps around is called the spinalis dorsi. And it is the single best muscle on the steer. So when I have a 7-bone rib roast, I peel that, and you can actually peel it with your hands, maybe a little help from the knife. But that fat layer it peels off at that fat layer. And I set that aside, and it's enough for 4 people maybe. It's kind of shaped like a salmon fillet. It's a little thicker, maybe an inch, inch and a half at one end, and maybe a ½ inch at the other end. And it tapers to a point. And if you can grill it hot and fast, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's extremely marbled and extremely tender and extremely juicy. So I separate it because often if you make ribeye steaks or if you do a whole rib roast, because it's on the outer layer, it heats up and overcooks. And so you end up with that outer layer, and you've seen this. It's gray. It's still very tender and juicy. But I take it off and I grill that to medium rare. Now I'm left with a cylinder of the eye of ribeye. That's the longissimus dorsi, the long dorsal muscle that runs along the spine. And that's the eye of the ribeye. And it's very tender, very juicy. And I will season that with my rub, and I will smoke it. And lately what I've been doing, because Christmas dinner is at my niece's house, and to go there over the river and through the woods, I don't want to go there 4 hours early and stand around and cook. So I sous vide it. I take that eye of the ribeye, long tubes, 7, it's maybe 18 inches long, 7 bones wide. And I'll take it and I'll sous vide it to 131. And that takes about 3-4 hours. I forget the exact timing. I have an article about this whole process and pictures and some video too. on AmazingRibs.com. And I'll sous vide it. And so it's now cooked perfect medium rare at 131. But it doesn't have smoke flavor. And the exterior, because sous vide cooks evenly everywhere, the exterior is tan. It's ugly. It needs to be browned. It needs Maillard reaction. So now I take it out of the bag when I get there. And usually I get there an hour before dinner's served. And I fire up the gas grill that he has. It's an old Weber Genesis. And I throw some wood chips on the fire. And I roll it around until I get a good dark crust. Bring it in, slice it up, and serve it. It's absolutely fantastic. It's a great technique for ribeye. Yes, Leonard, the spinalis is also known as the ribeye cap or the rib cap. Yes, the cap muscle. Good point. Yeah, and you instead of wood chips, you can use pellets, smoker pellets, chunks, whatever. Are there big differences between the different brands of smoker pellets? I have not noticed it. I have tried them. They all seem to work well. The flavors, they smell different, but I've never noticed a significant difference in flavor. And that's because the flavor of the food is like an orchestra. You have the meat flavor, you have the rub flavor, you have the flavor induced by the fire, you've got Maillard reaction flavors, you've got smoke flavors. If you're using sauce, you have sauce flavors. So the contribution of whether you're using apple or peach or cherry, I find to be minor. Now, I have noticed that surprisingly, cherry does make sort of a reddish color. Isn't that interesting? But I've never noticed a huge difference. I use primarily apple wood. And I have bags of it, and that's my standard, and I don't vary. I mean, it's so much more important to cook to the proper temperature, to control temperature, control heat, control smoke, that the flavor of the pellets. Now, hickory and mesquite tend to be stronger flavoring, so I avoid them. But no biggie. Gary says he's using a Costco mix with... Sure, why not? You know? Why not? So long as they don't jam up. Well, we've been at it for about an hour, and the questions have tapered off. And I'm kind of interested to see if the Yankees stay alive tonight. I'm not a fan of either team. I'm in the Chicago area, so we pretty much hate both teams. The Dodgers are bitter enemies of the Cubs, and the Yankees are bitter enemies of the Sox. But you know, I watched the first inning, and Yankees teed off with back-to-back homers. So let's see if they keep it alive and go into L.A. for a Game 6. So if I don't see you guys before Thanksgiving, I wish you a pain-free election night, and to remember that I don't ever talk about politics, but we survived the Trump administration. We survived the Biden administration. We still have a great country, and I suspect that however it turns out, we are bigger, better, and stronger than whoever gets elected. And we'll still be able to barbecue. And we'll still be able to eat and love our family and have Thanksgivings. And we'll survive. And so don't let it get you down. Have a great Thanksgiving. No more political fights over dinner. And before I sign off, somebody new just checked in. What's the best method to cook a ribeye steak on a Weber coal grill? 2 zones. Yeah, 2 zones. I've got really good articles on steak. In fact, I've done a whole ebook on steak, which is free to members of our Pitmaster Club, but it's $3.99 on Amazon. Talks about whether and then the cooking method for steak is different for thick steaks and thin steaks. You do them differently. Thickness is the determining factor. And MAG, you just got here, and I'm sorry I had to sign off on you, but we've been at it for an hour, and I want to go watch some baseball. So thank you very much, everybody. And MAG, go check out my articles on steak on AmazingRibs.com, or get that ebook on Amazon or Apple Books. It's on all the ebook sites. Thank you very much, everybody, and happy Thanksgiving.